name is Tim Griffin. I'm the Dean of Students and Campus Pastor. And we are really thrilled to host this conversation. And we're just excited about the students who are so committed to engaging others in this really important topic. So thank you for joining us in this place. I wonder if you would take a moment and stand with me if you're able. And we're going to open our time together in prayer, and then I'll turn it over to Edgar, who will lead us tonight in the rest of this presentation and conversation. Would you pray with me? Our God and Heavenly Father, we pause for a moment to acknowledge you and to say thank you for your grace and your mercy in our lives. Thank you for these students who have led us to this place tonight to have this very important conversation. And so we pray that you would engage our minds and our hearts on what takes place on this stage tonight. And I pray that you would lead us and give us your wisdom and your insight through what takes place here this evening. So God, we thank you for the love and grace that you give to us, the mercy that you've bestowed upon us. And we pray that in return, that you would teach us how to love you and to love others. That great commandment that you share with us in Scripture, to love our neighbors as ourselves. I pray that you would teach us how to do that, and tonight would contribute to it as well. We pray all these things in Jesus' name, and for his sake we pray. Amen and amen. Thank you for being here. Please have a seat, and I'll turn it over to Edgar now.
Hey, everybody. So my name is Edgar Moreno. I am the LSU president, and I have been trying to work alongside my team for quite some time now to kind of not just give an example of the Latino community here, but also embrace the culture amongst you guys. We kind of want to make sure that you guys get to experience and get not just a chance for discussion, but on top of that, just exposure to seeing what people can do when you look across side the aisle.
Hi everyone, my name is Daniela Chavira. I am the Vice President for the Latino Student Union. I am very excited for today's event, and I hope that this will spark a conversation across campus and we can really create a change for the Latino community here on campus.
So before we continue today, I kind of just wanted to say welcome President Mueller and give him a little bit of a chance to give his side of the story.
Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for coming tonight. And I've gotten a chance to know Edgar and Danny a little bit, and extremely excited to work alongside them. Edgar is a senior and will be leaving pretty soon. Sophomore. He's going to be here for 3 more years, and Danny will be here for 4 years. So I just want to say a little bit about the university and what we're trying to do. We're doing a lot, but we could always do more. We can always do more. And I hope what comes out of this tonight is some information that you will talk about, and hopefully out of that will come back to us suggestions as to how we can do more. Just a little bit of background. We came here 12 years ago, and there were 900 students on the campus, and close to closing down. We came here because we had this dream of creating a private Christian university whose tuition would be affordable to all socioeconomic classes of Americans. And we wanted to do it here in the middle of one of the largest Hispanic communities in the world. The plan involved going to the public markets and pitching our idea, which is, there's a lot of risk in that. It involved creating a hybrid campus, so we deliver online and on ground. And to be honest with you, there was risk, and it turned out way better than we thought. God has honored what we have done in amazing ways. And so as it started to unfold, and we were building this campus out, it was our determination not to raise tuition, to keep it affordable. We haven't raised tuition in 13 years. And as a result, as this campus has grown from 900 students to 23,000 students, next year 25,000 students, 28% of those students are Hispanic, 8% are African Americans, and 47% of the students on our campus are students of color. many of our students are graduating with far less debt than the average state university student, and parent loans, our parent loans are 50% of what state universities are. And so we have so many students that are graduating with very little or no debt and going into the world in very, very productive ways. We want to keep that going. We started what we call a 5-point plan 8 years ago, and the 5-point plan was to use the free market system and to use a Christian university to transform an inner city neighborhood that largely comprises immigrants. That was a big task, but we're more excited about it today than we've ever been. The first part of it was to build the university here in this place and not move it to Scottsdale or not move it to Paradise Valley or Orange County, California, but to build it here. We've created 14,000 jobs. We're hiring as many people as we can in the community. It's important because if we hire an immigrant in the community, they get a salary, they get benefits, and then their kids can go to college for nearly free here if they work here. The second thing we try to do, or we're trying to do, is spin as many businesses off of this one as we can on an annual basis. We started 12 new businesses that employ 500 people. The golf course, the hotel, the restaurant, the coffee company, the advertising company. It's the same thing. If we can hire people in the neighborhood and they work for these companies, then they can send their kids to college for almost free here, which is a tremendous benefit to that family and can transform that family. The third thing was a partnership with the city of Phoenix to get the crime out of the neighborhood. We're working very, very hard so it's safe here. A lot of kids were afraid to go to walk to school in the morning and come home because gangs would interrupt them. We had to get the criminal element out. The fourth thing is homes. We have the largest Habitat for Humanity program in the world going here, and most of the homes are owned by either immigrants or Hispanic families. Housing values, we've rebuilt 306 homes, and our goal is 800. The fifth thing is the most exciting thing. We wanted to get as many kids involved in college as we could. And so we started a tutoring program where literally, if it wasn't for the pandemic, we have 1,200 kids providing tutoring every day to thousands of kids in our neighborhood for free, most of them Hispanic. People heard about that program, they got excited, and we started raising money. The goal was to raise money to have 800 students on full tuition scholarships. 95% of them are Hispanic and coming out of this neighborhood. We're now at 360. I just met a guy about a year ago, Ernie Garcia. Ernie Garcia was a poor Hispanic kid raised in Gallup, New Mexico, one of the poorest cities in America. He taught himself how to play golf at a nine-hole golf course with sand greens, got a scholarship to U of A, graduated, started a company called Drive Time. And then his son thought of that people would buy cars online. He started a company called Carvana. They're now the wealthiest men in the state of Arizona, and they want to get behind this effort. Bob Parsons, who owned GoDaddy, heard about this effort. He contributed $500,000 to our SIS scholarship program to help us get to 800 kids, but then he got really excited and wrote another check for $2 million specifically for DACA students. We've got other people very interested. Artie Marino, one of the wealthiest men in Arizona, is Hispanic, grew up poor, but built one of the biggest outdoor companies in the world here in Arizona. He loves what we're doing, and I think he's going to be interested in getting behind this. When I met Edgar and Danny is a mechanical engineering major. Is that correct? That gets me extremely excited to see young Hispanic students going to college and studying in very, very difficult academic areas. I hope she runs her own engineering company someday. Those are the things that we're trying to do. I know that Kristen Sinema, our senator, is, I believe, drafting a bill around immigration reform, and I know that she wants to meet with us. She likes what we're doing here. We have at least 400 DACA students on our campus. We are not a political entity. Our job is to help people go to finish high school, go to college, graduate, so we can build a better community for everybody. The playing field is not equal. The playing field needs to be equal. The surest way to make it equal is through education and business. And so guys like Artie and guys like Bob Parsons, people like Ernie Garcia, those are people that started with nothing, believed in the American dream, used the free market system to create a lot of wealth, and now they're pouring it back in the community. We want to get with as many of those kinds of people as possible so we can keep this going. So I have another meeting that I have to go to, but I know that some good things will come out of this meeting. And please, Edgar, and let me know what it is. We're doing a lot, but we can always do more. We can always do more. We just need to get your ideas so we can keep going. So that was probably a little bit more than I was supposed to say, but welcome here, and I hope this is a fantastic evening. Thank you, guys.
So before we begin, I'd like to give you guys a little purpose and summary of what this event is about and what we hope the message you get is. So today you will hear from 4 amazing panelists with all very distinct and different backgrounds within the immigration community. All of them are from different backgrounds and hold different statuses, and I hope that with their stories and with their experiences, we can learn to humanize the immigrant community and really learn from their experiences and how we can best support this community, especially here on campus. This panel is student-led, and everyone on this panel is a current either faculty or student here at Grand Canyon University. And with that, I would like to introduce Jose Patino, the Director of Education and External Affairs at Aliento, so he can give us a little background and context of the video that we will be presenting today.
Hi, my name is Jose Patino. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me here. I am a DACA recipient. I'm one of the older ones. I'm originally from Mexico. I migrated to the country when I was 6 years old. Grew up in West Phoenix, not too far from here. I studied mechanical engineering at ASU, and I got my master's here at GCU when I was a Teach for America core member. And what Daniela asked me to talk about a little bit is just about sort of what was going on when this documentary was in place. It was 2013. There was a lot of hope in the community. There was the leader that we had in immigration reform in terms of speaking was Senator John McCain. I don't think there has been any elected official since who has taken the reins and have a conversation across the aisle with business leaders, faith leaders, and the community on the human issue and also the economics of immigration reform. At the same time, we had massive deportations under the Obama administration, particularly affecting families. I had my cousins and aunts and uncles who were in deportation proceedings simply for driving to going to work or going to church. So there was a lot of expectations, and 8 years ago, actually, the GCU Latino Student Union hosted and screened this same film here. And they invited me to come as well. I knew some of the leaders back then. And also, President Muellner was there as well. And at that time, it seemed like it was inevitable. It was that we were going to find a solution. Now we're here 8 years later. It's been 36 years since we had a immigration reform. Earlier today, actually, the House of Representatives passed H.R. 6, which would provide pathway to citizenship for what we call dreamers, those who came into the country as minors. And I think while there is this opportunity, there's also this grim reality that a lot of the community faces, that we've been here before, that we've seen this movement before, they send the support, and ultimately we end up with nothing. And it's been both Democrats, Republicans, so there's nobody to blame. It's both of them have had their opportunities. President Obama had over 8 years, and he was not able to deliver. We have President Bush and President Trump as well. Now it's up to President Biden. And I think a lot of things that the community feels is that we can potentially get there so long as we open up our hearts and put aside the differences. Maybe we'll take the leadership of somebody like President Reagan in 1986, who was able to bring the country together And that was the last time we had immigration reform. So with that, I leave you to watch the documentary. The panelists will be great, and thank you for having me here.
So with that said, are we good on the video, by the way, to throw it up right now? We're actually gonna show you guys the video that Jose has mentioned and actually even got to act in a little bit. So we'll throw that up on the screen, and then further from there, we'll go into the panel.
For immigration.
We're in 2021, 10 years away now, and while the issues aren't the exact same, they're still out there. And I don't know about you guys, but I personally did not know about half the stories that I was hearing because I grew up in a community where, while we were all Hispanic, to me, they were all just there. Status wasn't a thing, and we didn't really get to discuss it. And getting the experience that I got, not just from this video, but working with the panelists today, I got to learn some questions. So because of that, we wanted to give you guys the opportunity to do the same thing, to kind of come to a better understanding of what's going on out there and hopefully get the questions that you didn't even know you had answered. Can we get the slide with the remind up, please? So we actually created a remind for you guys, and I want you guys, any question that you have, submit it through, send it through, and just whatever it is, does not matter. If you have a question, we're gonna try to get to it and hopefully answer all your questions today. So you guys are more than welcome to text that. Text 81010 at GCU, I believe it's GCU LSU 2021. Might be a wrong edit on our end, I apologize if that is true. But text it, get us those questions in, guys, and honestly, we just wanna hopefully get the answer. And with that, so I'll let Daniela do the rest.
Yeah, so just to give a little context, after that video, the Barack Obama administration was pushed to have DACA in place. That happened because there was a lot of pressure, and when the DREAM Act, the 2010 DREAM Act occurred, we were 5 votes shy. And those 5 votes would have changed my life, as I am an undocumented immigrant myself, and most of the panelists' lives would be changed because of that as well. Those 5 votes were Democratic votes, and right now, we need all the push and support we can get so we're not here in the same place once again. This screening of this video was shown here in Grand Canyon University in 2013. Jose Patino was also here, and the story keeps going. The dream continues, and the importance of that title is why we labeled it that way today. LOPES, the dream continues. We want this dream to become a reality, and we really need that support with everyone here right now. You are going to hear some of the stories of the panelists, and you heard the stories of the people in the video. So with that said, I would ask the panelists to come up and help me share the importance of our immigrant community and have that support.
So yes, the code will actually be GCU LSU 2021. It didn't get added into the slide. I apologize for that.
So thank you guys for being here, everyone in the audience as well, the live stream, thank you for being here. This means a lot personally to me, and I know it means a lot to them as well. Before we begin, I'm gonna have everyone introduce themselves, and before that, I would like to give some basic terminology regarding immigration terms and what they mean. If you don't know, undocumented means no lawful presence here in the United States, and DACA means DACA recipient. That means they were eligible for DACA and they can hold a driver's license, work permit, and have some sort of legal status here in the United States. A mixed status family is a family that has multiple types of statuses. That includes immigrants such as undocumented parents and citizen kids, or resident, they can have DACA, and there's just a mixture of statuses within that family. And with that being said, I'll pass it over to Karla to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about herself and why this conversation is important to her.
Hi, everybody. My name is Karla Islas. I am a GCU senior. I am currently a legal receptionist at Diamondback Legal. Our firm is immigration and business litigation. I am a DACA recipient. I'm actually in process for a U visa as well, but it's been quite a long time. I came to the United States when I was 2 years old. I was quite literally on my mother's back, and the journey here was extremely difficult. At one point, they thought there was one of the 2 girls were dead. So me and another, we don't know how that happened, but moving forward, I didn't realize I was undocumented until I was about 10 years old, and my parents sat me down with my sister and my brother and said, if anything happens to us, your sister, who is 19 years old, has to be responsible for you guys, and you guys have to listen to your sister. And then when I turned 16, my dad was physically assaulted because he couldn't speak English. And before then, my mother was robbed at gunpoint. And then my brother was also robbed at gunpoint. So immigrants face a lot of adversity even after they take the courageous and dangerous journey getting here. Right now, my brother, my mom, and my dad are in process for a U visa. We've been waiting since 2016. My mom has been waiting since 2017, and my brother has been waiting since 2018. In 2018, my brother was also sadly deported 3 days before my high school graduation. He won't be here to see my college graduation, but I am so grateful that I'm going to be the first person in my family to get a degree from a university, and hopefully in the next year or so, I'll be attending law school. But the dream continues, quite literally, it continues. I have to keep pushing for not only myself, but for everybody else around me.
Thank you for that, Karla. I know personally the experience that comes with being an undocumented immigrant, the trauma that comes with that's very heavy, and I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. And with that being said, Milagros, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your undocumented story, and why this conversation is important to you?
As Daniela mentioned, I'm an undocumented student. I immigrated here with my mother when I was 9 months old. She brought me here in the first place for a better education, as it would be impossible to receive a college education in Mexico. But along came problems, and I started showing symptoms of a brain tumor. So as doctors mentioned, as doctors continued examining me, turns out I still have a brain tumor, and I was treated up until I was 12 years old with chemotherapy and radiation. Those, thankfully, and thanks to the United States, I'm blessed to be here. And a family decided to pay all my treatments off. And because of that, of my hard childhood, I'm in biology. I'm majoring in biology with an end goal of becoming an oncologist, so I could do the same thing as my nurses and doctors did before. And as my peers mentioned, the dream definitely continues, and this is just the beginning.
Thank you for that, Milagros. You have truly honored your name. Milagros means miracle, and she's a living miracle standing in front of us sharing her story today. With that, Catalina, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and why this conversation is important to you as well?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Catalina Insunza. I first came to the United States with my mom and my sister when I was 8 years old in the early 2000s. I started elementary school not knowing any English, not knowing how to communicate with my teachers or my peers or asking for help or anything like that. I would get home in the evenings and not really have anybody to help me with homework, which really just kind of drove a really strong want and need to really succeed in my academics. By third grade, I was fluent in English. By fifth, I was added into gifted programs. I was in gifted all throughout high school, and I was even in the honors college here at GCU during my college career. Currently, I work at GCU as an adjunct faculty. I also assist the provost of the university, and I am also the scholar advisor for the Dream.US scholarship program, which currently GCU has about 130 students in that program, and those are all undocumented or documented students who have really great and amazing academic just knowledge, and they have all been able to get awarded some scholarships amounts for that. So I'm very glad that I'm able to be a mentor to those students. In my high school career, I was the top third person out of my entire graduating class. I was accepted into Yale University for Ivy League. I was accepted into all the in-state universities as well. However, with my undocumented status at the time, I was not able to really follow any of those colleges at all. Fortunately, GCU was right down the street. I grew up in West Phoenix near Trevor Brown High School, so I knew about GCU a lot, and they did not ask about status. They provided me with a lot of academic scholarships that allowed me to complete my degree debt-free. I also started working here full-time after I graduated, trying to get back, of course. I started my master's program, so currently I also have my Master's of Science in Psychology with an emphasis in forensic psychology. All of those were done with a lot of hard work, a lot of perseverance, but again, it was all with a lack of status at the time. When I graduated as a senior in 2012, it was when President Obama announced the DACA program. So I immediately applied. I was able to get a driver's license eventually. I was able to get a student worker job at GCU, and then eventually get a full-time position here as well. So obviously, the dream does continue. There's a lot still to cover. There's a lot of path to go through. I still am a DACA recipient. I'm in renewal proceedings at the moment. My DACA expires in August. So it's not something that we don't necessarily think about. We think about it every single day of our lives. I'm thinking about my renewal status right at this moment. We had some really great news this morning with the passing of, the Promise Act and the Promise Act and the DREAM Act in the House. So we are hoping for some really great news in that area, and the dream continues, so we'll see how that goes.
Thank you for that, Catalina. And yes, the dream continues. HR 6 is the bill if you want to research it and look at it. We are really hopeful for that, and we really want something to happen. Like all of you guys are hearing these stories of these people. It's very impactful, and I've been through it as well, and with that, I want Julia to introduce herself and share why this conversation is really important to her as well.
Hi, everybody. My name is Julia Kupis. I am currently a junior here. I'm studying government. My family moved to the United States when I was 5 years old from Canada. We came here on visas. A few years after we immigrated to the United States, my parents had divorced, and my dad ended up marrying somebody else, an American, so that allowed us to be able to get our green cards shortly after. And so we had our green cards for about 5 years. My dad started the citizenship process back in 2017. The process is super slow. It takes a really long time, and I actually aged out of the system. I had turned 18 by the time he finished all his paperwork to become a citizen, so I had to kind of restart that and do it all myself. I actually became a United States citizen January of 2020, so it's just been a year for me. So that was super great. Back in high school, I really got into politics and government with the hope of wanting to help make the country better and help implement change, especially since I was an immigrant. And I saw the process firsthand, and I saw not only how expensive it is, but also how long it can take and how difficult it is for people who don't have the proper resources. So my hope with this conversation is that we can help bring awareness and different perspectives to this reform and continue the dream, basically.
Thank you, Julia, for that. Like you mentioned, there's many misconceptions about being an undocumented person or being an immigrant here in the United States. There's misconceptions like, why don't you just apply for citizenship? Trust me, I think we all would. But that's not how it works. And with that being said, Catalina, I'll pass this question to you. What misconceptions does the American public have about being undocumented around the immigrant community? Can you explain that and really paint us a picture?
Yeah, sure. So one of the big topics that I think comes across a lot is that a lot of people don't know the difference between different types of statuses and different types of immigrants. So they kind of see it as one size fits all. We're all the same. But as you all heard today, there's a lot of different stories. There's a lot of different types of statuses. People are in limbo in a bunch of different ways, whether it be undocumented, documented, in the process of getting citizenship and things like that. So that is one of the biggest ones, just the fact that people don't understand that there's a difference amongst the different statuses and things like that. Another big one that I know that is a big topic of conversation is that people believe that when immigration laws are passed or when we open up these conversations, it floods the country with new immigrants, with new people crossing the border and coming through. People do believe that there are more immigrants than ever in the United States, but when you really look at the data and you really look at the information, you start to see that we do have the most amount of immigrants that we've ever had, but it's on par with what we've had before in terms of comparing it with the regular population of the U.S. So it's not that there are more immigrants coming, it's more so that it's just staying on par with as the population grows. So that's a big misconception that is out there in the public. They just think that if laws are passed that are beneficial towards immigrants, it'll just flood the country. Another big one that is really out there is, the question that you said, why don't people just apply, go through the regular process? And what people don't understand, like I mentioned before, is that there are different statuses that people hold, and in that same way, there are different requirements when it comes to being able to apply for citizenship. Students who are, for example, DACA, like myself, we don't necessarily have any means to apply for citizenship the way that the law currently stands. Although I've never had any criminal history, I have my degrees, I entered the country lawfully and things like that, there's not necessarily any direct path for me to be able to apply, so my only option at this moment is DACA. So it really does fall in the hands of the government to start to pass comprehensive immigration reform to start to tackle these issues because, again, there's a lot of misconceptions out there. There's a lot of lack of knowledge. And so the government, first and foremost, has to be the one that kind of steps forward and starts to create that change because otherwise these misconceptions will never go away. The narrative will continue, and it'll, we saw it in the video here that was shown 10 years ago, and that we're showing it again. The misconceptions just kind of recycle themselves, but those are the ones that I've noticed have been the most harmful in general when we have these conversations, for sure.
Yeah, thank you for that. Like we were talking about, there's a lot of misconceptions and there's a lot of stigma around the immigrant community, or like stealing jobs. There's a lot of things that come with that, and these people have told you their stories and they have shown you that they're hardworking, they graduate with top honors, they're going to law school. There's amazing things that these people are doing, and we really need to humanize this conversation. And with that being said, Julia, there's a lot of hope with the new Biden Biden administration. What are your hopes for immigration reform for someone who has gone through the process of becoming a citizen? You've seen firsthand how long it is, how much it costs. What are your hopes for that?
So my hopes is that they're able to create a process that's easier for people to go onto this path of citizenship, because currently if you don't have the right resources, if you don't have the right knowledge, the right funds, it can be extremely difficult to get these visas, to get these green cards, because a lot of the times you just don't know where to start. So by being able to create this process that's more streamlined and a shorter timeline, hopefully we can get more people onto this path of citizenship, and so they don't have to live with any uncertainties and risks.
Thank you for that. Karla, for you, you're going through that process right now with the U visa. Can you explain to the audience what that means and how that process really works, and your hope for the Biden administration, and what you hope in this optimism that's growing right now, what you hope will come from that?
So for those who don't know, the U visa is a non-immigrant status visa that allows victims of crime, so whether that be kidnapping, torture, or assault, rape, anything, who work with the police and work together to bring them justice and bring forward the justice system to bring criminals to their consequences. You are allowed to go through the process of getting non-immigrant status, and then you are, after 3 years of non-immigrant status, you're eligible for a green card, and then after a green card, you're eligible to become a citizen. This process is extremely long. I went into the process at the age of 16. I just turned 21, and I'm still waiting, and we still have about a couple more months to wait. It is slow because not only is the immigration system overbooked, but there's also a lot of caps that hinder the amount of people who can get the visas every single year. So last time I checked, they were barely on the applications for April of 2016. So I still have a minimum of at least 3 more months, and then if they don't reach the caps by then, because if they do reach the caps, then I have to wait another year. So I am extremely hopeful for this bill to finally, because last time I looked into the bill, into the plans that the Biden administration wants to do, they want to go ahead and not open the caps, but raise those caps. So I'm really hopeful that they will raise these caps, because it will help more people like me who have been waiting since 2016, more people like me who have been, there's other people that have been waiting since before 2016, before 10 years of, more time, for a longer time than I have, that are still in the process, and we never ever want to streamline our way to the front. We never want to cut somebody in line. We just want there to be a line.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think we can all agree that we wish this process was easier, and it's definitely not. We've heard different stories, and Milagros, I think you can touch on this as well. DACA recently opened up, and it was restored again to its original version. Can you speak on that? I know that your mom is a DACA recipient, and you're DACA eligible, if you want to touch on that. And Catalina, can you touch on that as well, on how it affects you as a DACA recipient now that it has opened back and you can reapply?
So when DACA first opened, I was too young to be eligible to apply, but my mother was eligible, and she started her process. It was a pretty long process. She went back to school. That allowed her to, at the time she was working 2 jobs, day and night, so we barely had any time to see each other. But with her DACA renewal, with her receiving DACA, that not only allowed her to provide for our entire family, as she was the only person to work in the household. She was able to spend more time with us. That was a bittersweet moment in my life, because even though my mother received a way to stay here, I was still on a limbo. At the time I was in high school, and I wasn't sure if college would be something for me, as college seemed out of my reach. But my mother, besides receiving treatment when I was in middle school and in elementary, she always said that school or education was not an option in her household. And ever since then, I think that's what pushed me to be here today. And thanks to the Dream US, I am studying to be a biology major, and I'm in the process of applying for DACA. I just turned in my application in January, and I still haven't heard back. So I'm just hoping that in the future we have a faster process, as that would allow me to work, have a stable job, and help out my family, even though my scholarship covers tuition.
Well, for me, like I said, applied to DACA my senior year. It really helped me in a lot of different ways. I knew that I was, now had legal presence, so some of that fear went away, at least for a little bit. When I first got DACA as well, Arizona was actually one of the only states that started to bar DACA recipients from obtaining IDs and obtaining driver's license. So even though I had lawful status, I had a social security number, I was unable to get a driver's license. So driving to school, to campus, when I was living over by 75th and Indian School was a bit of a hassle. My mom and my family, we had one car, so it was a lot of taking turns to see who would drive me to campus and things like that. I would get dropped off in the morning. I would be here until 6 when somebody was available to pick me up. Eventually, they did start to allow us to get driver's license and ID, so that was amazing. I was a 20-year-old when I learned to drive and when I got my license, which is a lot different from the experiences of a lot of teenagers in the country. A lot of my friends were driving way before me and things like that. What I really see that's important now that the program has been restored to its original version and now that students are able to start to apply again, and I'm especially seeing that as the scholar advisor for the Dream.us, is that I've had a lot of students reach out and start to ask me more career questions and professional development questions because now they have a lot of hope that they're able to start to apply for this, legal presence, this status that they can now have a means to be able to enforce their degrees once they're done with GCU. These are students that are freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors that have been going through the programs, with amazing academic merit, which is really shown by the fact that they are the recipients of that scholarship. However, they were working towards their degree with, again, being in limbo, not really knowing how they would be able to enforce and work and, be engineers, be doctors, be nurses, because they wouldn't be able to be recipients of DACA. Now that it has been restored, those students have a lot more hope, and I do see that they're getting mobilized, they're applying for the program, they're getting their family members to apply. I personally, my sister was too old for the program, and she actually dropped out of high school, so she was not eligible. As soon as the program was brought back, my sister's now asking questions about a GED and how she can go and get those classes and start to get that information because now she is eligible. She has 2 young girls that are 13 years old, they're twins. And so, she is another person in my family who, really deserves that kind of status and who can now really benefit from being a new applicant to DACA so that she doesn't get separated from her family, from her 2 young, citizen children that are here. So although I was able to get DACA, my siblings were not. And now that it's back, my sister is eligible and she's able to apply to that. So it is bringing a lot of hope to people. And again, I've seen it a lot just on this GCU campus working with the Dream.us students who now have the opportunity to apply and benefit just as I did.
Yeah, thank you. So I believe, Milagros, you talked about the subject of education, and I believe that within the American dream, you think picket fence, you think this house, the dog, you think of a diploma, and education seems to be a really big pillar when it comes to the American dream. But right now, there's American youth that really don't believe in the American dream. Milagros, you touched on this subject, and Karla, you're going to be graduating soon, walking across that stage, and that's a really big part of the American dream. What are your guys' beliefs in the American dream? Why do you guys believe in the American dream, and why should others do so as well?
So as you mentioned, the American dream for me is an education. In my household, my mother always uses this motto. She says, La educación no es opción en mi casa, meaning that education in her household was not an option. So you either went to school or you had no other option. You had to go to school. And that was a big push for me to continue my education, even throughout the many hardships that we faced. At one point during the Obama administration, I remember my mother writing letters to my aunts who were residents here or that had green cards, allowing them to take care of us. At the moment, I didn't understand, yet my mother was preparing if something were to happen to her. And now that I look at it from my point of view, that's extremely sad for a mother having to write a letter to make sure her children are okay in the hands of the proper people. But thankfully, my mother was never deported. She is a DACA recipient still, and she'll be going into renewal now. But as I mentioned, she did go back for her GED, and now I would be the first generation to go to college, and that itself is a big accomplishment. So that's one one way that I define the American dream, as well as just having a home here. My mom had received the opportunity to buy her own house here, so she's also living the American dream. And I hope to, as I said before, I want to be an oncologist. So I'll be working with kids just as my nurses and doctors did before with me.
So I define the American dream as opportunity. As we know, the American dream, like when we think about it, it's having 2.5 kids, a dog, a white picket fence, and that's what we automatically think about. But for me, it's opportunity. It's the availability to pursue whatever personal dream you have, whether it be going to college or not going to college, doing an apprenticeship, anything. When my American dream is to eventually become an immigration lawyer and practice law and bridge the gap between a very scary and inhumane system and people who have three-dimensional, lively stories, who have culture behind everybody, humanizing the system, to these individuals that deserve to have their voices heard. I'm very fortunate that I was given the opportunity to have DACA. I know that my brother and my sister, they also have DACA, but they didn't have the opportunities that I did. My sister she had to struggle through grabbing her medical associate's degree from Pima. She had to pay out-of-state tuition, and that is very, very hefty, especially for a family that does not make a lot. But I'm so glad that I am able to not only voice my voice, but the voices of other undocumented immigrants to say, hey, these people have dreams too, and they deserve to have an opportunity to get the dream.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think all of us really want to strive for the American dream, especially, with the pandemic right now, class of 2020, I graduated in my dad's truck. I thought that was pretty interesting, and right now we're still kind of going through it. Karla, you're going to be graduating through a pandemic as well, and it's kind of interesting to see that our immigrant community is still striving through all of this. We've always been pushing, always hardworking, and, our parents always instilled those morals of, work hard, and you'll get it there, and that's always been something that I held deeply in my heart. It's work hard, and I am going to bring awareness to this immigrant community. I'm going to make sure people are aware behind the faces of when you hear undocumented DACA recipient immigrant, you're going to see their faces now and their stories. And with that being said, Julia, what do you want the audience to take? How do you want them to best support the immigrant community? What do you think would be the best way to support the immigrant community and help us out and really bring awareness to the subject?
Yeah, so I think the best way to help support the immigrant community is by voicing your opinions and stuff like that, because a lot of the times people are silent about these kinds of issues, and it's really important to make your voice be heard, share on social media your opinions. Also, petitions are great, signing petitions, and that just lets people know that they have a backing behind them and that they do have support of more people, as well as you can write to your local politicians, write to your local representatives. That's what's great about our government system, is that our government officials represent us. And so the best way to have our voices heard is to make sure that they know what we want and they know what is important to us. So that's the best way that you can support this community and to make sure that all of our voices are heard and we see real change.
Yeah, with that being said, Karla, you're working, with that immigrant firm. I don't really know the name, sorry for that, but you're working with them and you know what it takes to really help this community. What can immigrant supporters really do for that? What can they do other than sign petitions? Should they educate themselves now that they have heard stories like yours and stories like Julia's, Milagros, and Catalina's? What can they do?
Yes, so I work for Diamondback Legal. I'm literally so in love with this firm. They really believe in looking at everybody individually and giving them individual strategies. I'm going to share a little bit of my brother's story. He actually was deported in 2018, and he was deported because he had, I can't remember the issue, what it was, but he did something bad, essentially. But if one lawyer just looked at his background and saw that he was assaulted at gunpoint, then he would have had a different opportunity. He would have had a different pathway. His life could have quite literally turned out differently. Who would have known? If a lawyer took a chance and looked at my brother's story and got to know his client, he would be able to see that his story goes beyond that surface level interaction. And I think that my brother's story and what we can take away from one lawyer's mistake is that every individual has a story. Every person has something that they can share and expand your mind. Challenge your biases. Talk to an undocumented immigrant. Start using different vernacular. Stop referring to us as illegal aliens, because that just dehumanizes us. And as we know from the teachings of Christ, we are all made in God's image. We are all human. We are all deserving of love. And furthermore, definitely talking to our representatives and really holding them accountable, like our own representatives, our two senators that are going to be voting on this new bill, Kristen Sinema and Mark Kelly. They need to speak the voices of Americans. 70% of Americans believe that dreamers and undocumented people deserve a pathway to citizenship. 70% of people, and in 10 years we couldn't get anything done. It is in the hands of our representatives and be seen as an individual and not just another statistic.
Yes, that's something very powerful. And like she said, we're more than just a statistic. We're more than 1, 5, 7 people of the 11 million undocumented people here in the United States. It is incredibly hard, hearing in the media, especially how the media portrays immigration as illegal aliens, or like the terminology used is always DACA, and you're like, what about the rest of the population that fits other categories? We can't all fit into this checkbox. And now that you guys have heard our stories and our panelists, who I am honored to have here tonight, I would like you guys to ask your questions and really challenge your biases and ask your questions. What do you guys want to know about the immigrant community? What is something you wish you would understand? And how can we better help you understand with that? And with that, Edgar, I'll pass it over to you for the public Q&A.
So just to reiterate, guys, if you want to just add GCU LSU 2021, that's the original one. Sorry, the text actually got a little messed up on the slideshow, but I am getting a lot of your guys' questions, and one of the biggest ones I think we need to talk about is these labels that are getting portrayed everywhere. So initially, we're getting talked about what are the different statuses for being undocumented. So we talked a little bit about DACA, we talked a little bit about being undocumented or mixed status. Do you guys want to reiterate, just as a panel, and I urge you guys to just talk in conversation with one another, just what actually defines each and every label to the community?
Could I take this one? Okay, I think labels are very, very important. Not only having them, but also the absence of them. They speak volumes. The absence of labels is us being just one person, one individual. We are all one body. The second part is labels are so important because you don't realize how important it is to call someone by the right term. So on GCU campus, have been called an illegal immigrant, not American enough, on this campus. And instead of shutting completely down the conversation, I took the time out of my day, even though it hurt me quite a lot, to say, that's not correct. I'm so sorry that you feel that way, but I am undocumented. I am documented. I am more than just an illegal alien. I'm not not human, you know? I'm a human being. I deserve to be treated with respect because I will treat anybody else with respect. And we know that we have to give people respect in order to really understand them and love them as a person and just understand their story. But yeah.
Do any of my panelists want to answer that as well? Any of you three, you guys are good to go. Do you guys want to add on top of what I'm saying? Sorry about that. No? All right. One of the other things, it's another label that's being attached, is if the DREAM Act is still being passed, why are some people referred as dreamers? And I think, Catalina, you're probably the best one here to answer that, so if you could please.
Yeah, so essentially when people refer to dreamers, they really are talking about, young immigrants, undocumented immigrants who came to this country when they were very young, when they were children, when they were adolescents, people who essentially came to this country without any other choice. They were brought by parents, by siblings, by family members. They didn't really have a say in the matter and being brought here. However, they are Americans all the way through. They are individuals that grew up here. I personally am from Sonora, Mexico. However, if I were to be, going to Sonora, there was no way that I would even be able to find my grandma's house. However, I could tell you every single house that I've lived here in Phoenix. I could, drive around the streets, maybe not know the names of the streets, but I know where I am and things like that. So that's something that's very important to dreamers. They are Americans by every sense of the word, except for status. So a dreamer is, again, essentially just a young individual that came to this country, without their own decision. They've grown up here, they've worked here, they've gone to school here, they've met friends here, they learned the language, they've exceeded in different aspects of their lives. So these are just individuals that have grown up here. Like I said, I came to Phoenix when I was 7 years old. I'm now 27, so that was 20 years ago, and I'm still considered a dreamer. So a lot of the times we hear in the news people calling these individuals, the DACA kids, the dreamer kids and stuff like that. But when you start to think of the actual numbers now, a lot of these DACA kids, a lot of these dreamer kids, they're not so young. The median age, I think, at this point is between like 28 and 30 years old. So they're my generation. So they are just those individuals that came when they were very young, that have lived here, and that they consider themselves Americans. But unfortunately, at this time, status-wise, they actually are not. So when you think of dreamers, it's those people, those undocumented students or individuals that came here when they were young, and now they're just continuing to raise families and create a livelihood.
And just to further even go into more of it, could you guys actually describe the current path to citizenship and some of the issues that come with trying to become a U.S. citizen? So Julia, if you want to kind of go into detail on how that story went down.
Yeah, so with my experience with it at least, so my family, we immigrated to the United States with visas. My mom was able to get a visa through NAFTA to work in the medical field. My father had a visa, working visa through his company. He was working in electronics. So you have to have your visa for a certain amount of years before you're allowed to go any further. And most of the times before you can get a green card, you have to be sponsored by an American. So in our instance, my father had married an American, so that helps to speed this process up a little bit more. So my stepmom sponsored my family, my brother, my dad, and myself. She sponsored us, and we were able to get our green cards. And with that process is a lot of, you go through interviews, you have to have witnesses, you have to submit photos proving that like this marriage is real and you're not just doing it just to get the paperwork. So it can often be sort of like scary and intimidating having to go to these immigration offices just to prove that like you're here and you're here for the right reasons, basically. And then after you get your green card, you have to have that for 5 years, I believe. And then after 5 years, my dad was able to apply for citizenship. How it worked for us is that since my brother and I were technically underage, we weren't adults yet, we were able to all apply on the same application. However, the process is super long and super slow, so Personally, when we did it, the process took over a year. So by the time my dad's citizenship application got approved and he was able to move on to the next step, I was unfortunately 18. So I had to start the process over and do it by myself, basically, which is scary in and of itself, being an 18-year-old having to go through like the test and everything like that, the big scary test. And so after you have this application approved for your citizenship, you go in, you do biometrics, which is like fingerprinting and things like that, and then you go and do this big test. You get this big old packet, and it basically has every single historical event that's happened in the United States. You get asked about the president, you get asked about George Washington, you get asked about the longest river in the United States. It's very comprehensive, and you don't know what you're going to get asked. They give you 10 mysterious questions, totally random. I mean, for myself, I am a government major. I love politics, so the prospect of this test, while it was scary, it was kind of fun because I like history and government. But I did help my dad study. My dad moved here when he was older, so he knew a little bit about it, but he needed some study help, so I helped him study. And then after that, you take your test, you get a certain amount of questions right, you become a citizen, and then after that you get to go to your naturalization ceremony, which is pretty fun. You go and you give them your green card. They cut it up so you can't use it again. And then you go and you take an oath swearing allegiance to the United States. And then you get your own little pocket constitution. You get a cute little American flag. You say your oath, and then you're a citizen. And for me, that process took me 15 years to complete. I just became a citizen at 20 years old last year, so it's super long, very expensive, but yeah.
You know, 15 years, honestly, is just insane to see that happening. And I know you're not the only one out there who's been doing that. But actually, you are being asked a question, Julia, is how do current immigrants represent immigration in the country? So you know a lot of people expect that half the immigration comes from south of the border, but you being here is actually showing people that it's not just from the south. So can you elaborate a little bit on how current immigration is being represented?
Yeah, so current immigration is being represented that that people are coming across the border illegally, like bringing bad things into this country, doing bad things, which is just simply not true. Personally, myself, I come from a long line of immigrants. My mom and my grandma immigrated from Poland to Canada and to the United States before I was born. My grandma came to the United States and was undocumented herself for a long time. So there are a lot of misconceptions about immigration in the United States, and it's not people coming here to coming here from the southern border, coming here bringing bad things. Immigrants are people from all over the world just coming to truly live the American dream and to be able to make this great life for themselves. And there are a lot of misconceptions about this, and me being here today is just to show that I'm a Canadian, but I'm also an American, and yeah, immigration, there are a lot of different types of immigrants. Immigrants come from many different countries than what is stereotypically believed.
And I actually have a question for all four of the panelists, if you guys can answer this one. So we're getting, sometimes DACA members know more about the history of the United States than the American citizens themselves. Do you think the test should become easier, or is the test reasonable right now? So Julia, I especially want you to top this, but if we can get all four panelists on this question.
Yeah, so we were talking before the panel, and we were saying that sometimes I feel more American than most Americans just because we have to know super comprehensive American history to be able to pass this exam. And some people, I know people that don't even know, like, basic facts about American history. So I think the test, I don't think that, personally, I don't think the test is super hard, but I can see how it's really intimidating for people that didn't grow up in the American education system. I came here when I was 5 years old, so pretty much all I know is American history, American politics, and government, so I grew up with this, and so I came into this with that sort of advantage. But for people that might have immigrated here when they were older, they didn't go through the education system, it can be difficult for people to study and learn. So in some ways it is difficult just because it's such a huge, there's 100 questions that they give you that is possible for you to get. So it is such a huge number and you just don't know what you're going to get. And it's really hard to study and memorize all 100 questions, but I think it's just different for each person.
And then for me, I guess that well, the test is one of those things that I don't think will go away. I do think that it can be outdated, just like you said, when it comes to older people who are trying to apply for citizenship, or maybe people that English wasn't their first language, that they weren't in the American education system. I actually personally have a story about that where when I was 12 years old, my mom's boyfriend at the time, he was actually going through his citizenship process and he was studying for the test. So you have a 12-year-old and a 45-year-old sitting in the kitchen table every night, and I'm tutoring him on American history to help prep him for the test. So he actually ended up passing. He's a U.S. citizen now, and all of that. But you can kind of see the image, you know, a 12-year-old in elementary school or in middle school tutoring this older man to get ready for his citizenship test. So even from a very young age, I kind of, you know, felt that daunting, like scary American test for the citizenship test and stuff. So it's a scary entity for a lot of immigrants that when they think about it, we've talked about how expensive, how long the process is, but for some reason when people talk about the test, it's one of the things that when people are going through the process, they fear it the most, because after going through all those roadblocks, so many years of waiting, so much money spent, so much tears, so much time, and all of that, and all of a sudden, all of it can go away by just getting, you know, more than 3 questions wrong, and things like that. So it's definitely one of those things where it has a lot of negative connotations for the community, just because everything is riding on this test. If you thought the ASATs were hard, like this is something that they really, really, really dread, just because it's one of the last steps before, you know, that golden ticket. And so it can be something that's really daunting for a lot of immigrants when they start to think about that.
As mentioned before, I also think the test is outdated. Just from my perspective, I don't think that I necessarily have to take a test for me to prove I'm American. It's just that the U.S. hasn't realized we are Americans. We grew up here. So I personally don't have an experience with the test, but I'm expecting, I grew up here at 9 months old, so I'm guessing that I would know all the questions on there, no doubt. But just for, let's say my mother were to become a citizen, I don't think that would be fair to her. So I just think it's a little outdated for them.
I don't know if anybody else had to take the civics test in high school. They did it my senior year, so I had to do it for graduating. So I quite literally already took the citizenship test. Where's my citizenship? But I surprisingly got a higher score than most of my classmates. And I don't know if it's because I'm a history buff and I love history and I just love America. But I got a better score than my citizen friends. So I'm just waiting right now. I'm just waiting. But another thing is, if I took the Mexican citizenship test, I know for a fact that I would get nothing on there because I don't know a lot about Mexican history, which is kind of crazy because I have birthright citizenship in Mexico, and I know nothing about our history except for the Mexican-American War, quite literally.
You know, funny enough, I actually we had 45 kids in my econ class when we had to take our civics test, and I kid you not, I think about 25 of them were literally cheating off of their phone or something like that to try to get through, which is kind of scary to talk about as it is. But one of the biggest things that we're having is a lot of people who are trying to understand this concept. They want to know, how do you even have these difficult conversations with people? How do you actually get to ask these questions?
first, don't go about it in a mean way. That's the first part. But secondly, try and just be as honest as possible. If you don't know how to ask someone, like, how did you get here? Don't say, why are you illegal? Definitely say, like, can I know your background? Can I know your life story? Can I know this about you? It's not only just like knowing their struggles, it's knowing who they are as a person. So as you get to know your neighbor, as you get to know the person next to you, you will figure out what their struggles are. You will get to figure out how they got to this position. I don't know if my mom would like me to share this, but I'm going to share it anyways. My mom experienced a lot of violence in Mexico. She experienced a lot of sexual violence and physical violence. If I pull up statistics off the top of my head, over 50% of women in Mexico face violence. There's a big femicide going on right now where in 2020, the femicide rates, which is female genocide or female homicide, skyrocketed. And I know for a fact that my mom didn't want me to face that. And it wasn't until I was 18 that I figured out my mom's story. So it's about talking to your parents and not talking to parents, but talking to someone and just asking vulnerable questions as in the best environment possible. I asked my mom, why do you tell me all of these advices? Like, why do you tell me not to go out at night? Why do you tell me not to be alone? Don't walk my dogs alone. And then she opened up to me and she let me into this part that I'm so grateful for, and it makes me see my mother in a 3D dimension more than just like the person who calls me at 11 p.m. every single night. So, yeah.
I think there's no proper way of asking. I think we just open up. I think undocumented students and DACA students are willing to speak to anybody if the other person is respectful. It just takes the right time and the right place. It just happens to be that in my English class, I was talking to someone on like them struggling with scholarships, and I was like, oh, I'm actually very knowledgeable about scholarships. And they happened to ask me what scholarship I had, and I told them it was a undocumented student-driven scholarship. And ever since that day on, they never spoke to me again. And I find that a little funny because why are you gonna stop talking to me, you know?
So I guess when it comes to that, there's a lot of listening that really has to be involved, especially now. Back when I was in high school, SB 1070 was going on in Arizona, that whole, racial profiling and stuff. So there was a lot of fear in the community. People didn't want to talk about their status. People didn't want to share their stories. Since then, we've come a long way. There's a lot of activism that is going on, especially in younger generations, the people that have been driving this movement. So we're ready to talk. We just are trying to find people who will listen. So the best thing that you can do when it comes to, asking questions and hearing these stories, or just listen with an open heart. Most of the time, especially now, people will share with you. You will see their activism on social media. You will see them speak passionately about certain topics. And so those are the times to start asking questions. What is that post that you shared? What does it mean? What is this panel that you're going to, that you're sharing? Just asking questions like that, having an open mind and an open heart is very important. Because I think at this point, after years and years of advocacy and years of activism, there's not a lot of people that want to be silent anymore. They're screaming in the streets, they're screaming in the Capitol. So at this point, there's not a lot of silence going on. There's not a lot of hiding. We're all up here on the stage. We're all disclosing our status to you, as you saw in the video back then too. And so the most important thing is just listening. So it's not a matter of, what questions should I ask? It's more so just listening to the people that are going to be speaking to you about the issues that are impacting their everyday lives.
And I also think it's important to go about the conversation with kindness and compassion, because we're all human, and nobody likes to feel degraded. Nobody likes to feel less than they are because of their status or where they come from. So it's important to go about that conversation with that in mind, because at the end of the day, we're all human. We all live on Earth together, and the only thing that separates us is just where we come from and where we're born. And
Yeah, I would just like to add, like they were saying, like you take this in a compassionate way, you have this conversation in a nice way. Don't, obviously, like you said, why are you illegal? You don't ask that. Same way that you don't ask certain questions, you go about it in a compassionate way. But before you even ask questions to someone else, I think it's always best to like question, where are you from? Like, you know, where's my ancestry from? Like, where did my grandparents come from? Did they immigrate? Like, where's my heritage? Where does my culture come from? Like, if you draw a line and, like, you know, you see all these commercials about Ancestry.com and, like, all these things that pop up, and you're like, oh, my God, my great-grandparent was this. He was famous for this. And you're just, like, connecting these dots. And I think all of us, at some point, were, like, generations of immigrants. And, you know, this nation was built on immigrants. And people need to realize that and really see that and have this conversation with even their own parents or grandparents. You know, I don't remember the last time I sat down with my grandma and had this conversation of like, oh, where did you come from? Or like, where did you migrate from? Did you ever immigrate? Like, our names hold like different cultures, they hold different meanings, they come from different places, and I always think it's important to ask yourself, where are you from? And when did that person immigrate? Was it you? Was it generations before you? Was it recent, you know? And really have that conversation with yourself and with your family. And then kind of from there, you'll have this better understanding to ask someone else their immigrant story as well.
You know, there's another really, really interesting question that just kind of came in, and it was mainly, is there this minority mentality within the immigrant community? Do you guys get even outcasted from your own cultures? Is it just the U.S., or are you experiencing this even in your own culture? And if we could actually just start going through with Karla.
So this isn't the first panel I've actually done. I've actually done another panel that had to do with this topic. It was called Being an Enye. So it's being in this weird place where you're not Hispanic enough, you're not Mexican enough, you're not your original culture, your native culture but you're also not American enough. You're not Hispanic, or you're not American enough. You don't have the same status. Like, it's just being in this weird middle place where I speak English and I speak it great, but sometimes I say democracy wrong sometimes. I had to make sure I was saying it right that way. And sometimes my accent comes out. But other times when I'm speaking Spanish, I feel less than and inferior because I'm scared that I'll get something wrong, or I'm scared that if they look at me, they'll be like, that's just a little gringuita right there. That's just a little white girl right there. But like, I'm obviously like not. But I have assimilated so much that like I sometimes feel distant from my own culture. So I've been trying to actively introduce myself as Karla Eva Islas Ayala, and trying to find my inner identity within the Hispanic community and trying to get in touch with everything around me. So yes, I do, in short.
Do you guys anyone want to add on, or are we good on that? All right. One of the other things is just because we're kind of running a little short on time here. We're in 2021, and honestly, COVID has impacted us greatly. I actually have a daughter of 2 immigrant parents who's suffering from the same impact of the unemployment issue that we're getting here. So how has COVID affected the undocumented, and will there be lasting repercussions greater than what you're saying for just the common American that you're seeing out there?
So when it comes to the COVID pandemic, it really hit the immigrant community hard. A lot of essential workers that work in the restaurant industry, that work in the agriculture and all of that, overnight they were out of their jobs. These were individuals that Many of them were the single income in their household. Many of them, without that second income or their income, they were no longer able to pay the bills in their homes. So the lack of jobs and when everything closed down was really, really impactful to those people. Personally, in the beginning of last year, I was in the process of getting ready to move out. However, I had to put all of that on hold because every single person in my family lost their jobs except for me. I was working at GCU at the time, obviously. The university didn't close. We kept going. We didn't have any layoffs that were extreme or anything like that. So I was very fortunate to be in a position where I was able to support my family for many months between, March to pretty much the entirety of the summer. And that was just one single paycheck, in a household with my mom, my older sister, my younger sister, and my older sister's 2 daughters. So that was 5 people that were reliant on my paycheck to pay rent, to pay the water, to pay bills and stuff like that. So it really impacted a lot of people, not just those who are undocumented, but people who have DACA that all of a sudden felt the weight of the world on their shoulders supporting their family members. A big thing about it too is there was that uncertainty about healthcare. They don't necessarily have health insurance. They don't necessarily have access to, visit a doctor regularly. And even now with the vaccine, there's a lot of, misconceptions. There's a lot of misinformation about, can I get the vaccine if I'm an immigrant, if I don't have an ID? There are, for example, even some programs across the country where if you're trying to get a vaccine at CVS, you can't if you don't have an ID, so you have to go through the state program. But if the state program is clogged and people can't get appointments, then again, that creates a backlog. So there was definitely a health crisis, a job crisis, and just a social and mental health crisis that was pretty unprecedented in the immigrant community. Of course, it was felt worldwide, but for this really vulnerable population, it was sort of felt tenfold.
So I felt that so deeply in my soul. Me and my sister were the only 2 people eligible for any of the stimulus checks because we are DACA recipients, and since we do have a social security number, we were eligible for them. So this next one, I was able to actually give most of it to my parents because I didn't need it, and I know that they work so hard to just make it to the next day. Another thing is that the public charge rule was recently taken away. So the public charge rule is essentially if you got any services from the government, so Medicaid, food stamps, anything of that sort that's from the federal government, that would be counted against you for any type of immigration application. So that was recently taken away, which is really, really, really good because it deters immigrants, it deters people who are living in the shadows from going to get health care, which is so immensely important, especially if you're suffering from COVID, especially if you are experiencing hardships. I had a really close family friends who were afraid of this public charge rule, and sadly, her name was Selena. Selena had her son, who was a dialysis patient, and her husband both die from COVID because they were too scared to go get the help that they needed. So these issues are very, very important. These issues are so close to home, and COVID has only heightened them and made them more real.
And so we actually, just because of the timing right here, before we end up going, I kind of want to hear it from all 4 of you. One of the biggest questions out here is, you see a lot of fight back on a lot of pushback on this, on the DREAM bill, but not just that, but any immigration bill in general. Why is that? A lot of people are asking, what's going on in the mentality of the politicians? Now, while you guys can't speak to them, I would love to hear what you guys are thinking is the biggest fear or issue that's affecting them. So we'll start off with Karla, and we'll just go down the line.
I think the biggest fear is that, not to point fingers, but the biggest fear for me particularly is that we will have another flip-flop from our representatives. So as we know, Kristen Sinema was recently in the news for flipping on that 15 minimum wage that she had supported for 7 years. And she supported the DREAM Act for longer. And I do not want her to flip-flop on 11 million undocumented individuals, because you are quite literally being the deciding factor between life and death of these people and us. You are quite literally holding your hand in a yay or a nay. So I don't want you to go, you know? I don't want you to go to that. I don't want you to do that to somebody's livelihood, because it is so important. For politicians, I believe some of them are afraid to just even show support because of the rhetoric we had around immigrants. But 70% of Americans agree that DACA recipients should have a pathway to citizenship. 70%, that's almost 100, so, yeah.
I believe that senators and the House of Representatives are scared of those rotten apples in between us. They prefer to keep those rotten apples, treat them as all rotten apples. So let's say all of us are headed for a higher education, and there could be someone who really doesn't care about their education, but yet they would still be contributing to the economy. I'm just thinking that senators really don't take us into account. They don't think about the hard work we've put into all our education, and that the DREAM Act would impact us highly, positively impact all of our families.
So one of the things that I think that, you know, I've seen pretty much across the board and through so many years of just listening to this debate and stuff, it just seems like a lot of the fear is coming from just a lot of the misconceptions that we discussed in this panel today. There's a lot of fear surrounding the immigrant community. There's a lot of negative rhetoric out there, but it's just a matter of, again, educating people. A lot of the senators that are, you know, very, you know, that they advocate anti-immigration rhetoric and anti-immigration reform and that are voting no in some of these bills, they've been in a certain position for so long that that's almost like that's the positions that they run with. So a lot of the times it almost feels like the way that they're voting is more so in terms of for like their own political gain, their own political agendas, and so they have more fear about their own futures as opposed to the fears and acknowledgement of the fears of the 11 million immigrants in the country. They are more worried about the next election as opposed to, you know, passing comprehensive immigration reform that could potentially change the lives of millions of people. Whole generations could be impacted by, you know, an amnesty or by something like that that can change the livelihoods, that can change the, it can just change so much across the board for so many people. But sometimes it just comes across like the main fear is just the next election cycle and not necessarily the livelihoods of so many people that are being put on the line.
So sort of piggybacking off of that, like especially in recent years, we've seen harmful rhetoric about immigrants and the undocumented community just skyrocket, and there's just so many misconceptions, and I believe that these politicians are afraid of going across the aisle, working with their counterparts to pass this comprehensive immigration reform because they are afraid of the next election cycle not being elected again. They're afraid of losing their funding from donors and things like that, and they would rather risk the lives of the 11 million undocumented immigrants, undocumented people than pass this comprehensive immigration reform that could change the lives of so many people. And that's just something that needs to change. That's a misconception that needs to be changed, like through education, through like this panel today, how we're able to help inform people about this sort of thing. And
You know, and it was kind of funny because me and you have been talking about this for like a week now, discussing on how there's so much fear going on politicians. But it's not even just the impact that you guys are speaking on. It's also there's this very big tension when it comes to the bipartisan party, whether you're talking about the presidency or whether you're just simply telling them this whole new ideal of racism where it's you're red or you're blue and that's it. You're seeing a lot of conflict in the political world out there. And I'm 19. I barely jumped into politics. I've done a few bills, but that's about it. I haven't really gone too far. And up in this panel together, you guys are all seeing some very talented people out here. These students, and they've just been doing so much when it comes to, they've been working their asses off since they were teenagers, to be honest. And I can't really remember much, but we're getting close to an end. Karla, do you want to add something real quick? Oh, yeah, no. So we just kind of wanted to give you guys a giant thank you, both the people who are here and the people who are on our live stream today. We hope to be able to do more panels like this in the future, to be honest, because the whole point of not just LSU, but the aspect of the clubs that are on campus is to provide a voice for the students. And if we can't do that, like what we see today on the panel, you're not only hearing the students' votes, but for my politicians who are on the live stream, hopefully, you're hearing your constituent votes. And these are things that matter. These are things that need to be talked about. And I just want to say thank you to all of you guys who were actually able to stay for the full 2 hours and 45 minutes. And if we can see you guys in the future at other panels, that would be amazing. So before we wrap it up, I'm just going to let Dani talk about what you guys can do, because we saw that question come up a lot.
Yes, so you guys have been asking what can we do to like talk about this discussion, really, you know, help us out as immigrants. You know, now we're in the light, literally in the light stage, out of the shadows. You guys have heard our stories. We are no longer illegal aliens. Now you know us by name. You know, Karla Islas, you know, Milagros Heredia, Catalina Insunza, and Julia Cupis. Like, you know our names. Daniela Chavira, you know me now. And what I want you guys to do is to put that link in your phone. Take out your phones right now. Put that link into Google and sign that petition. Sign it and have our senators, Kelly and Sinema, support this bill. We really need immigration reform. We've been waiting for far too long. The dream has continued for far too long. I am tired of wanting this dream. I want it to become a reality, and I think we can all agree, someone who has been through the whole immigration process, some of us who are waiting, we want this dream to become a reality. And like I said, LOPES, the dream continues. Help me and help us make this a reality and sign this petition. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and I can't thank you enough for your support.
And for my people who are actually here today, if you guys actually get those panelist papers and turn it around, there is a QR code down there. That'll have an end of event survey. You guys can kind of just talk to us a little bit about how this panel has gone for you, your experiences. We're gonna use this not just to streamline more panels in the future, but on top of that, to hopefully actually raffle off some rewards. And thank you guys not just for listening, but for actually being here. It's a huge step. This bill is one thing. There's a lot more policies out there, and the more you dive into it, the more organizations you get into, you guys will be able to see that there's more than just signing your paper, and that one sign can honestly do a lot, as you saw in the video. Thank you.